The crystal ships moved like sharks through space, their sharp edges cutting through the darkness. Behind them, the beautiful world of Thesara Prime burned. The Vorthak Empire had come to finish what they started 3 years ago. Elder Kiro stood in the great temple, his blue skin pale with fear. Around him, millions of Zilani people knelt in prayer. Their large, gentle eyes looked up at the ancient symbols carved into the temple walls. These symbols told old stories about warriors who lived somewhere in the dark parts of space. "Great spirits of the void," Kairos whispered, his voice shaking. "Our people are dying. We are not fighters. We make art and music and poetry, but they come with weapons and death. If the legends are true, if the warrior race exists, please send them to us." The Zilani had never hurt anyone. They grew food on beautiful farms and built cities that looked like works of art. Their ships were made for exploring and learning, not fighting. When the Vorthak came with their crystal warships, the Zilani could only run or hide. Above the planet, more Vorthak ships appeared. They looked like giant crystals with weapons attached. The Vorthak themselves were tall beings made of living crystal. They did not understand art or beauty. They only understood power and control. Far away on a small blue planet called Earth, Admiral Jake Morrison sat in his office. The walls were covered with pictures from the Third Global War. His metal arms, replacements for the ones he lost at New Geneva, clicked softly as he typed reports. Earth looked terrible after the war. Cities were rebuilt with ugly concrete buildings. The sky was still gray in some places from all the bombs. But humanity was together now. The Terran Defense Coalition ruled the whole planet. No more wars between countries. Just one big human family that knew how to fight. Morrison looked tired. He had fought in too many battles and seen too many friends die. His secretary, a young woman named Lisa Hart, knocked on his door. "Admiral, we got something strange from the deep space sensors," she said. Lisa was smart, maybe the smartest person Morrison knew. She understood alien languages and biology better than anyone. "What kind of strange?" Morrison asked. Lisa put a datapad on his desk. "It's a message. From very far away. From people we've never met before." Morrison looked at the data. The message was weak, like someone shouting from across a huge field. But Lisa had cleaned it up and made it clear. "Can you understand it?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "It took me 3 days, but I got it." Lisa looked sad. "Admiral, they're asking for help. They say someone is killing them. They say their legends talk about warrior people who live in the dark parts of space. They think we might be those warriors." Morrison read the message. It was simple but desperate. The Zilani told about their beautiful worlds burning. They told about crystal ships full of killers. They begged for help from anyone who might hear them. "How far away are they?" Morrison asked. "About 6 months' travel at our fastest speed," Lisa said. "But sir, we don't know anything about these people. We don't know if they're telling the truth." Morrison looked out his window at the gray sky. Down in the street he could see human soldiers marching. They looked hard and mean even during peacetime. Humans had been fighting each other for thousands of years. Only recently did they stop fighting each other and start looking at the stars. "Get me Captain Ryan Cross," Morrison said. Captain Cross came to Morrison's office an hour later. He was younger than Morrison but looked just as tired. Cross had fought in the space battles around Mars during the last war. His ship, the TDS Vengeance, was one of the newest and strongest in the human fleet. "Ryan, I got a job for you," Morrison said. "Might be dangerous. Might be stupid. Want to hear it?" Cross smiled for the first time in weeks. "Sir, after 3 years of peace, I'm ready for dangerous and stupid." Morrison showed him the message from the Zilani. Cross read it twice, then looked up. "They want warriors?" Cross asked. "That's what they're asking for." "And you want to send humans?" "I want to send you and your crew. Take the Vengeance and a few other ships. Go see what's happening out there." Cross thought about this. His crew was made up of soldiers who had fought in every major battle of the last war. Commander Kate Sullivan, his second officer, was the best fighter pilot Earth had ever seen. Sergeant Major Pete Collins could kill a man with his bare hands in 12 different ways. They were all good people, but they were also very good at violence. "Sir, what if these Zilani are the bad guys?" Cross asked. "What if they're lying?" Morrison pointed to the message. "Read it again, Ryan. You think bad guys write messages like that?" Cross read the message one more time. The Zilani talked about their children hiding in caves. They talked about their art and music being destroyed. They talked about praying to old gods for help because they had no weapons to defend themselves. "No, sir," Cross said. Bad guys don't write like that. Then go help them, Morrison said. Take the Vengeance, the Reaper, and the Thunder. Commander Blackwood and Captain Torres will go with you. If someone is picking on peaceful people, maybe it's time they met some humans. Cross stood up and saluted. Yes, sir. When do we leave? Tomorrow morning. Lisa will give you all the information we have. Morrison's metal fingers drummed on the desk. Ryan, I got a feeling about this. These Zilani, they called for warriors. They don't know what they're asking for. What do you mean, sir? Morrison looked at the pictures on his wall. Pictures of human soldiers fighting and dying in terrible wars. Humans aren't heroes, Ryan. We're not saviors. We're just really, really good at killing things that need killing. Sometimes that's the same thing as being a hero. Sometimes it's not, Cross nodded. I understand, sir. I hope those crystal people understand too, Morrison said. Because once you humans get there, this war is going to end. One way or another. The next morning, 3 human warships left Earth's orbit. They were not beautiful ships like the ones the Zilani built. They were ugly, practical, and full of weapons. Inside them were 800 humans who had spent their whole lives learning how to fight and win wars. Behind them, Earth continued its slow healing from the last Great War. Ahead of them, somewhere in the dark, the Zilani people continued to pray for salvation. They had no idea what was coming to answer their prayers. 6 months later, Captain Ryan Cross stood on the bridge of the TDS Vengeance and watched a world die. Through the main view screen, he could see Nythera colony burning. The Vorthak crystal ships moved slowly around the planet like giant insects eating a piece of fruit. Their weapons cut long lines of fire across the surface. Where the beams touched, everything turned to ash. Jesus Christ, whispered Commander Kate Sullivan. She stood next to Cross, watching the destruction. How long has this been going on? Sensors show the attack started 6 hours ago, said Lieutenant Danny Walsh from the communications station. Sir, I'm picking up escape pods. Looks like some people got away before the main attack. Cross activated his communication system. Reaper, Thunder, this is Vengeance. You seeing this? The voice of Commander Thane Blackwood came through the speakers. Blackwood commanded the destroyer TDS Reaper and he sounded angry. Yeah, I see it, Ryan. Looks like we're too late for this one. Not necessarily, said Captain Frank Torres from the heavy cruiser TDS Thunder. Those crystal ships are still here. That means they're not done yet. Cross studied the tactical display. 12 Vorthak warships were spread around the planet. They were big, at least twice the size of human ships. Their crystal hulls reflected light in beautiful patterns, but Cross wasn't thinking about beauty right now. Sir, said Lieutenant Walsh, I'm getting a transmission. It's not from the Vorthak ships. Put it through. The view screen changed to show the inside of a damaged ship. A tall, thin being with blue skin and large black eyes looked at them. Cross had never seen anything like her before, but he knew this had to be one of the Zilani. Please, she said, her voice soft and musical even through the static. Are you the warriors of legend? We sent the call many months ago. We are Elder Myra of the vessel Song of Peace. We are all that remains of the colony ships. Cross looked at this gentle alien and felt something tight in his chest. She looked scared but hopeful, like a child who thinks her parents might come save her from monsters. Elder Myra, he said. This is Captain Cross of the Terran Defense Coalition. We got your message. We came to help. Her large eyes got even larger. Terran, you are the humans? The warrior race from the legends? Ma'am, I don't know about legends, but we're here now. How many of your people are still alive? 15 ships escaped the initial attack. Perhaps 3,000 souls, but the crystal killers are hunting us. Our ships are not made for war. Cross could see this was true. On his sensors, the Zilani ships looked like works of art. They had smooth, curved lines and seemed to be made more for beauty than protection. They were fast, but they had almost no weapons. Elder Myra, I need you and your ships to move away from the planet. Get to a safe distance. We're going to deal with these Vorthak ships. But Captain, you only have 3 ships. The crystal ones have 12, and they are so much larger than yours. Commander Sullivan looked at Cross and smiled. It was not a nice smile. Captain, should I tell her about human math? No, Cross said. She'll see for herself. Elder Myra, please move your people to safety. This might get ugly. The Zilani elder nodded and ended the transmission. On the tactical display, Cross watched the beautiful alien ships move away from the planet. They moved like dancers, graceful and smooth. All right, people, Cross said to his bridge crew. Time to show these crystal bastards what humans do to bullies. Kate, get us into attack position. Danny, open a channel to all Vorthak ships. Channel open, sir. Cross keyed the transmitter. Vorthak ships, this is Captain Cross of the human vessel Vengeance. You will stop your attack on this planet and surrender immediately. This is your only warning. For a moment there was silence. Then a new voice came through the speakers. It was cold and hard like glass breaking. Unknown vessel, you are in Vorthak space. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. We do not negotiate with lesser species. Cross looked around his bridge. Every human there had the same expression. They had heard that kind of talk before from other bullies in other wars. Thane, Frank, you copy that? Cross asked. Copy that, Ryan, came Blackwood's voice. Sounds like they need an education. Agreed, said Torres. Let's teach them about human politeness. Cross turned to his weapons officer. Charlie, lock all weapons on the nearest crystal ship. Load the special rounds we brought from Earth. Lieutenant Charlie Davis grinned as his fingers moved over the weapon controls. The special rounds were a human invention. Dense metal rods accelerated to incredible speeds by magnetic rails. Simple, effective, and very, very destructive. Weapons locked and loaded, Captain. Shall I send them a message? Send it. The TDS Vengeance fired 6 railgun rounds at the closest Vorthak ship. The crystal vessel was beautiful. Its hull cut into geometric patterns that caught and reflected light. The human rounds hit it going several miles per second. The crystal ship's shields, designed to stop energy weapons, did nothing against solid metal moving at near light speed. The rounds punched through the hull like bullets through paper. Secondary explosions lit up the crystal ship from inside as its power systems overloaded. The elegant vessel broke. Parton died in space. What? Whispered someone on Cross's bridge, on the communication channel. The Vorthak commander's voice had changed. It no longer sounded cold and confident. Impossible. Our shields should have stopped any primitive kinetic weapon. Cross keyed the transmitter again. Your shields were designed by people who fight clean wars. We're humans. We don't fight clean. The Vorthak ships turned toward the human fleet. Their crystal hulls began to glow as they charged their energy weapons. These weapons had destroyed Zilani ships easily. They were designed to cut through any known armor. The 3 human ships split apart and began moving in patterns the Vorthak had never seen before. Human military doctrine was simple. Move fast, hit hard, and never fight fair if you can help it. The Vorthak fired their energy beams. Beautiful streams of white light reached across space toward the human ships. The beams were precise and powerful, capable of melting any known metal. But the human ships weren't there when the beams arrived. They had moved at the last second, and the deadly light passed through empty space. Their targeting systems are too slow, observed Commander Sullivan as she piloted the Vengeance through a series of sharp turns that would have killed a normal human. But human pilots trained in high gravity and wore suits that let them survive forces that would crush other species. The TDS Reaper came up under a Vorthak cruiser and fired every weapon it had into the crystal ship's belly. Fusion missiles, railgun rounds, and plasma cannons all hit at once. The cruiser's beautiful hull cracked like an egg. The TDS Thunder used a different approach. Captain Torres brought his heavy cruiser straight at a group of 3 Vorthak ships. The crystal beings thought he was going to ram them and move to avoid collision. Instead, Torres dropped nuclear mines in their path and turned away. The mines exploded in sequence, creating a chain of miniature suns. 2 Vorthak ships were caught in the blast and simply ceased to exist. Elder Myra watched the battle from her command ship. She had never seen anything like it. The humans didn't fight like any species she knew about. They fought like they were designed for nothing but war. How do they move like that? Asked her tactical officer. How do they survive those forces? Whispered her pilot. Elder Myra could not answer. She was beginning to understand that the humans were not like other species. They had not developed into peaceful explorers or wise philosophers. They had developed into something else entirely. In 20 minutes, all 12 Vorthak ships were destroyed or drifting powerless in space. The 3 human ships had taken some damage, but they were still fighting. Cross opened a channel to the Zilani ships. Elder Myra, the immediate threat has been neutralized. Are your people safe? The gentle alien looked at him with her large, dark eyes. She seemed afraid, but not of the Vorthak anymore. Yes, Captain Cross, we are safe. But I must ask, what are you? Cross thought about that question. He looked around his bridge at his crew. They were already working to repair battle damage and prepare for the next fight. None of them looked upset about the violence they had just unleashed. We're humans, Elder Myra, we're the people who answered your call for help. But even as he said it, Cross wondered if that was the whole truth. Maybe they were something else. Maybe they were the monsters that other monsters were afraid of. And maybe sometimes that was exactly what the universe needed. 3 weeks after the battle at Nethera Colony, the human ships docked at Thesara Prime. The Zalani homeworld was the most beautiful thing Captain Cross had ever seen. The cities looked like they were grown instead of built, with flowing lines that followed the natural curves of the land. Gardens covered every surface and the air smelled like flowers. Cross walked through the capital city with Elder Kiros. The old Zalani leader moved slowly, his long robes brushing the ground. Around them, Zalani people stopped to stare at the humans. They had never seen beings like these before. Your people seem nervous, Cross observed. Elder Kiros nodded sadly. They are afraid, Captain. Not of you exactly, but of what you represent. We have lived in peace for so long that we had forgotten what warriors look like. They passed a group of human Marines on shore leave. The soldiers were trying to be polite, but they still looked dangerous. Their bodies were scarred from old battles, and their eyes moved constantly, checking for threats. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Price was showing them around, explaining Zalani culture. These are our artists, she was telling Sergeant Collins. They spend their whole lives making beautiful things. Collins, who had killed 47 enemies in the last war, looked at a delicate sculpture made of colored light. It's pretty, he said, and he meant it. But his hand still rested on his weapons. In the military compound that the Zalani had built for their human guests, Dr. Lisa Hart was learning about Zalani history. She sat with Elder Myra in a room filled with floating books made of pure energy. We have never had a war, Elder Myra explained. When we had disagreements, we would debate and create art until we found solutions everyone could accept. Violence was unthinkable. Lisa nodded, trying to understand. On Earth, humans had been fighting each other since before they invented writing. Wars had shaped their technology, their culture, even their bodies. What about when other species attacked you? Lisa asked. Before the Vorthak, no one had ever attacked us. Other species saw us as harmless, so they left us alone. We thought all intelligent life was peaceful like us. Lisa thought about human history. Humans had fought over food, land, ideas, and sometimes just because they were bored. They had invented thousands of ways to hurt each other, then turned those same skills toward protecting each other. Elder Myra, may I ask you something personal? Of course, Dr. Hart. When you sent that message asking for warriors, what did you expect to receive? The Zalani elder was quiet for a long time. We expected beings like ourselves, but with knowledge of defense. Perhaps people who had been forced to learn fighting, but remained gentle in their hearts. And instead you got humans. Yes, we got humans. Elder Myra looked sad. Dr. Hart, your people frighten us. Not because they are cruel, but because they are so good at violence. They destroyed 12 Vorthak ships in minutes, ships that had been terrorizing our space for years. Meanwhile, in the tactical center, General Frank Torres was meeting with Zalani military advisors. The Zalani didn't really have a military, just a small group that handled emergencies and natural disasters. You have to understand, Torres was explaining to Commander Zale, the head of Zalani security. Humans developed differently than you did. We come from a world where everything tried to kill us. The weather, the animals, the geography, and especially each other. Commander Zale looked confused. But how did you survive as a species if you were always fighting? That's the thing, Torres said. Fighting made us stronger. Every generation that survived was tougher than the one before. We got smarter weapons, better tactics, stronger bodies. War shaped us into what we are now. Torres showed Zale recordings of human military training. The Zalani watched in horror as human soldiers ran through obstacle courses designed to simulate battlefields. They saw humans practice with weapons, study battle tactics, and train their bodies for combat. This is how human children are educated? Zale asked. No, this is how human soldiers are trained. But all humans learn basic fighting skills in school. We teach our children to defend themselves because we know the universe can be dangerous. On the other side of the compound, Captain Cross was having a similar conversation with Elder Kiros. They stood in the Elder's private garden, surrounded by plants that sang soft music when the wind touched them. Captain, I must be honest with you, Kiros said. Some of my people believe we made a mistake calling for help. Why? Because you are exactly what we asked for. You are warriors. Perfect warriors. But we did not understand what that meant. Cross sat on a bench made of living wood. He was tired. The last few weeks had been spent hunting down Vorthak raiding parties and protecting Zalani colonies. It was the kind of work humans were very good at, but it was taking a toll. Elder, what did you think warriors would be like? We thought they would be people who had learned to fight but chose not to. People who used violence only as a last resort and felt sadness about it afterward. Cross laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. That's not what we are. No, you are people who chose to become very, very good at violence. You train for it, you study it, you prepare for it your whole lives. And when the time comes, you use it without hesitation or regret. Does that make us monsters? Elder Kiros was quiet for a long time. The singing plants filled the silence with their gentle music. I think, he said finally, it makes you something the galaxy needed but didn't want to acknowledge. The Vorthak have been conquering peaceful species for decades. We all hoped someone else would stop them. We all prayed for salvation, but did nothing to earn it ourselves. That evening, the humans and Zalani held a joint meeting in the Great Temple. The enormous hall was filled with representatives from both species. The differences between them were obvious. The Zalani sat quietly, their movements graceful and peaceful. They wore flowing robes in soft colors and spoke in musical voices. They looked like living art. The humans sat differently. Even when they were trying to be relaxed, they looked ready to fight. Their uniforms were practical and durable. Their weapons were never far away. They looked like what they were, professional soldiers. Admiral Morrison had arrived from Earth with reinforcements. He stood before the mixed assembly and spoke in simple, direct language. People of both species, he began, we need to talk about what happens next. The Vorthak Empire is bigger than just the ships we've destroyed. They have hundreds of worlds and thousands of ships. This war is just getting started. A Zalani counselor stood up. Admiral Morrison, with respect, perhaps we could negotiate with them. Surely they would be willing to discuss peace. Morrison looked at the counselor with tired eyes. Son, have you ever tried to negotiate with someone who was trying to kill you? Well, no, but the Vorthak don't want to talk. They want to own everything. The only language they understand is force. Another Zalani spoke up. But there must be alternatives to violence. What about economic pressure? Cultural exchange? Diplomatic solutions? Commander Sullivan, who had been quiet until now, stood up. Ma'am, how do you have economic pressure on someone who takes what they want by force? How do you have cultural exchange with someone who destroys your culture? How do you negotiate with someone who kills your negotiators? The temple fell silent. The Zalani were struggling to understand concepts that humans took for granted. Finally, Elder Kiros stood. Humans, he said, we asked for your help because we were dying. You came and you saved us, but now we are afraid of becoming like you. Cross stood up to answer. Elder, you don't have to become like us. That's why we're here. You can stay peaceful and beautiful and artistic. We'll handle the ugly stuff. But at what cost? What does it do to a species to be so good at violence? Cross thought about Earth, still gray and scarred from the last war. He thought about human children learning to fight before they learned to read. He thought about the monuments to the dead in every human city. It costs everything, he said quietly. It costs your innocence, your peace of mind, your faith in the goodness of the universe. It turns you into something that can survive anything but can never quite enjoy what you've survived for. The temple was completely silent now. But, Cross continued, sometimes that's the price someone has to pay. And sometimes, if you're lucky, someone else will pay it for you. Elder Kiros looked at this human captain, this professional killer who had traveled across the galaxy to protect people he had never met. You came to save us, he said. But who will save you? Cross smiled, and for the first time it looked genuinely happy. We save each other. That's what humans do. We fight the monsters so our kids don't have to. We carry the weight so others can stay light. We become terrible things so beautiful things can keep existing. The meeting ended with no formal agreements or treaties. But everyone there understood something new. The humans would fight the war. The Zalani would support them however they could, and both species would try to preserve what was worth preserving in a universe that seemed determined to destroy everything good. 8 months into the war, everything changed. Colonel Ben Hughes stood in the command center of the joint military base on Thesara Prime, watching the tactical displays with growing concern. The Vorthak Empire had stopped sending small raiding fleets. Instead, they were gathering their forces for something much bigger. Sir, called Lieutenant Walsh from the communications station. "We're getting reports from the outer colonies. Vorthak fleets are pulling back from active combat zones." Hughes frowned. The crystal aliens had been steadily losing ground to the human-Zalani alliance. Why would they retreat now? Where are they going? He asked. "Unknown, sir. Our scouts report they're heading toward the galactic core, deep into Vorthak space." Admiral Morrison entered the command center, his metal arms reflecting the light from the displays. Behind him came Elder Kairos and Dr. Lisa Hart. All of them looked worried. "Ben, what's the situation?" Morrison asked. "The Vorthak are up to something, sir. They've stopped fighting and started gathering their forces. We're tracking at least 300 ships moving toward their home systems." Elder Kairos spoke up. "Admiral, our ancient records mention something called star killers. They are weapons the Vorthak created long ago but never used. Perhaps they are desperate enough now." Dr. Hart had been studying Vorthak technology for months. If they have planet-killing weapons, they might be planning to destroy our worlds rather than fight for them. Morrison studied the tactical display. Red dots showed Vorthak positions. Blue dots showed human and Zalani forces. The red dots were definitely moving away from the blue ones. "Ben, how long would it take them to build these star-killer weapons?" "Based on what we know about their manufacturing capabilities, maybe 2 months, sir." "And how long to deploy them?" Hughes checked his calculations. "If they're targeting our colonies, they could start hitting targets in 3 months. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Around the command center, human and Zalani officers waited for orders. The humans looked ready for whatever came next. The Zalani looked afraid. "Get me Captain Cross," Morrison said finally. Captain Cross had been leading raids deep in Vorthak space for weeks. His ship, the TDS Vengeance, had become famous among both species. The Vorthak feared it, and the Zalani saw it as a symbol of hope. Cross's image appeared on the main screen. He was on his bridge, and behind him the crew was working at their stations. They all looked tired but determined. "Admiral," Cross said, "I'm guessing you heard about the Vorthak pullback?" "I did. Ryan, I need you to get close to their home systems. Find out what they're building." "Already on it, sir. We've been tracking a supply convoy for 3 days. Big ships carrying heavy materials toward the core systems. Be careful, Ryan. If they're building planet killers, they might be willing to use them on individual ships too." Cross nodded. "Sir, there's something else. We captured some Vorthak officers last week. Under questioning, they keep talking about the final solution to the soft skin problem." Morrison felt cold. He had heard language like that before in Earth's darkest history. "Ryan, I want you to..." Alarms started going off throughout the command center. Lieutenant Walsh spun around from his station. "Sir, priority alert from New Austin Colony. They're under attack." The main screen changed to show the New Austin system. Human colonists had built a small but thriving community on 3 worlds there. It was home to about 3 million people, including many families of soldiers serving in the war. But what dominated the screen was the massive Vorthak ship hanging in space above the main colony world. It was unlike anything they had seen before. Instead of the elegant crystal shapes of normal Vorthak vessels, this thing was purely functional. An enormous weapon built for one purpose. "My God," whispered Dr. Hart, "it's as big as a moon." The voice of Colonel Sarah Mitchell came through from New Austin. She commanded the small defense force there, and she sounded scared but determined. "Command, this is New Austin Defense. We have a massive Vorthak vessel in our space. It's charging some kind of weapon. Estimate 40 minutes until it fires." Morrison activated the fleet communications. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. Emergency jump to New Austin system. All available vessels, maximum speed." But even as he gave the order, Morrison knew they wouldn't make it in time. New Austin was 6 hours away at best speed. "Sir," said Hughes, "our nearest ships are the Vengeance, Reaper, and Thunder. They're 4 hours out." Captain Cross had heard everything through the open channel. "Admiral, we're changing course now. Maximum burn to New Austin. Ryan, even if you get there, it's 1 star killer against 3 ships. The odds..." "Sir, with respect, humans don't care about odds. We care about protecting our people." The screen split to show both the Star Killer and Captain Cross on his bridge. The weapon was slowly rotating, bringing its main gun to bear on the colony world below. On the Vengeance, Cross was giving orders to his crew. "Kate, I want everything we have. All weapons, all speed, all power. Danny, send a message to the colonies. Tell them to evacuate to the deep shelters." "Ryan," Morrison said, "there has to be another way." Cross looked directly at the camera, Sir, there are 3 million people down there. If that thing fires, they all die. If we ram it, maybe we can stop it." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Everyone in both command centers understood what Cross was suggesting. "Captain," said Elder Kairos softly, "there must be alternatives." Cross smiled sadly. "Elder, sometimes there aren't alternatives. Sometimes you just do what needs doing." Commander Sullivan appeared next to Cross on the screen. "Admiral, the Vengeance carries our full load of nuclear weapons. If we can get close enough—" Morrison closed his eyes. These were his people. His soldiers. He had sent them out here to fight, but he had hoped they would all come home. "Ryan, I can't order you to do this." "You're not ordering me, sir. I'm volunteering. We all are." The camera panned across the bridge of the Vengeance. Every human there was nodding. They understood what was being asked, and they were ready to pay the price. "Sir," came another voice. It was Commander Blackwood from the TDS Reaper. "The Thunder and Reaper are with Vengeance on this one. If one ship isn't enough, 3 ships might be." Captain Torres's voice joined them. "We didn't come all this way to watch innocent people die." Morrison looked around his command center. The Zilani were crying, their large eyes filled with tears as they watched these humans calmly prepare to die for people they had never met. "This is how you do it," Elder Kiros whispered to Dr. Hart. "This is how you become monsters. You sacrifice everything for others until there's nothing left of yourself." On the screen, the 3 human ships were accelerating toward the Starkiller. The massive weapon was nearly finished charging. Energy readings showed it would fire in less than 20 minutes. "Ryan," Morrison said, "for what it's worth, I'm proud of all of you." "Thank you, sir." "Kate, arm all nuclear weapons for proximity detonation. Danny, open a channel to New Austin." The screen changed to show Cross addressing the colony. In the background, people were running toward emergency shelters, but there wasn't time for everyone to reach safety. "People of New Austin," Cross said. "This is Captain Cross of the TDS Vengeance. We see you. We're coming." "Hold on." The Vorthak Starkiller fired. The beam that came out of it was like a piece of the sun torn loose and thrown across space. It was so bright that everyone watching had to shield their eyes. The energy readings were off all the charts, but the beam didn't hit New Austin. The TDS Vengeance had thrown itself into the path of the weapon. The ship's shields lasted for maybe 2 seconds before collapsing. The hull lasted another second before starting to melt. Captain Cross had just enough time for one last transmission. "Tell them we kept the faith." The Vengeance, loaded with every nuclear weapon in the human arsenal, exploded like a miniature star. The blast was so powerful it could be seen from neighboring star systems. The Starkiller, caught in the explosion, broke apart and died. New Austin was saved. The command center on Thesera Prime was completely silent. On the main screen, they could see the expanding cloud of gas and radiation where the Vengeance had been. Somewhere in that cloud were 800 human souls who had chosen to die so others could live. Elder Kairos was the first to speak. "Admiral Morrison, There are no words. Morrison's metal fingers were clenched so tight they made soft groaning sounds. "There will be words, Elder. There will be monuments and speeches and ceremonies. But right now there's just work to do." "Work?" "The Vorthak just showed us they're willing to destroy entire worlds. Which means this war just became about the survival of every peaceful species in the galaxy." Morrison looked around the room at both humans and Zilani. "They want to end this with planet killers? Fine. Let's show them what happens when you threaten human families." Commander Sullivan's voice came through on the communications system. She had somehow survived the explosion and was now commanding the rescue operations. "Admiral, this is Commander Sullivan aboard the TDS Reaper. We've picked up a few survivors from the Vengeance. Not many, but some. And, sir, the people down on New Austin are naming their children after Captain Cross and his crew." Morrison nodded. "Tell them we'll try to be worthy of that honor." "And Kate?" "Yes, sir. You're now Captain Sullivan. The Vengeance is gone, but her mission—" 1 year after the sacrifice of the TDS Vengeance, the human Zilani fleet gathered at the edge of the Cathera system. It was the largest military force in galactic history. 200 human warships, supported by 500 Zilani vessels carrying supplies and medical facilities. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the new flagship, TDS Honor. The ship had been built specifically for this mission, combining human weapons technology with Zilani manufacturing techniques. It was faster and deadlier than anything humanity had ever created. "Sir," reported Commander Walsh, now Morrison's communications officer, "all ships report ready for the final assault." Through the viewports, Morrison could see the Vorthak home system. 3 planets orbited a dying star, all of them covered in crystal cities that glowed with their own light. It was beautiful in a cold, mathematical way. It was also heavily defended. The Vorthak had brought every ship they had back to protect their homeworld. Sensors showed over 400 crystal vessels in defensive positions around the planets. "Lisa, what's our intelligence on their Starkiller production?" Morrison asked. Dr. Hart, now wearing the uniform of a military advisor, consulted her datapad. "Based on our raids over the past 6 months, they've completed at least 12 of the planet-killing weapons. They're positioned around the outer system, and if we can't stop them, they could destroy every human and Zelani colony in the galaxy, sir. This is their final gambit." Morrison nodded. The past year had been brutal. The Vorthak had used their star killers to destroy 6 colonies, including the beautiful Zelani art world of Symphonia. Each loss had made the humans more determined and the Zelani more desperate. "Sir," came a voice from the tactical station.
"Captain Sullivan is requesting permission to begin the assault." Morrison activated his communications.
Kate Sullivan now commanded the strike group that included the rebuilt TDS Vengeance. She had insisted on keeping the name, saying that ship's legacy needed to continue. "Kate, you're authorized to begin the attack. Remember, we need to take out those star killers before they can fire." "Understood, Admiral. Strike Group Alpha is moving in." The battle began with a coordinated assault by 50 human ships against the outer defense line. The Vorthak had learned from previous defeats and modified their tactics, but humans were very good at adapting too. Captain Sullivan led her group in a high-speed run toward the nearest star killer. The massive weapon was protected by 20 Vorthak cruisers, but the humans had a plan for that. "All ships, execute Pattern 7, Sullivan ordered. The human vessels split into small groups and began attacking from multiple directions at once. The Vorthak defenders tried to respond, but their rigid command structure couldn't adapt fast enough to the chaotic human assault. The TDS Thunder, now commanded by Captain Maria Santos, used its heavy weapons to punch through the enemy line. Behind it, destroyers and frigates poured through the gap like water through a broken dam. "First star killer is in range," reported the weapons officer aboard the new Vengeance. "All ships, concentrated fire," Sullivan ordered. 20 human warships opened fire on the star killer simultaneously. The enormous weapon's shields collapsed under the assault, and its crystal hull began to crack. Secondary explosions lit up its interior as critical systems overloaded. The first star killer died in a brilliant explosion that could be seen across the entire system, but the battle was far from over. General Torres, now commanding the ground assault forces, watched from his command ship as the space battle raged around them. His job was to land human Marines on the Vorthak homeworld and capture their command centers. "Sir," reported Colonel Amy Price, "the Vorthak are launching their reserve fleet. Looks like everything they have left." Torres studied the tactical display. The crystal beings were throwing every ship they had at the human fleet. It was a desperate move, but it might work. The humans were outnumbered 2 to 1. "All ground forces prepare for combat drops. We're going in hot." The Marine dropships launched from their carriers and dove toward the surface of Kythera Prime. The Vorthak homeworld was a maze of crystal spires and geometric buildings. It was beautiful, but it was also heavily defended. Sergeant Major Pete Collins, now a Master Sergeant, led the first wave of Marines down to the surface. His dropship took heavy fire from Vorthak ground defenses, but the pilot managed to land them near the capital city. "All right, Marines," Collins shouted over the sound of enemy weapons. "Same drill as always. Find the bad guys, shoot the bad guys, protect the good guys." The Marines advanced through the Crystal City, fighting building by building. The Vorthak ground forces were tough opponents, but they had never faced humans in close combat before. Marines who had learned to fight in the ruins of Earth cities were very good at urban warfare. Back in space, Admiral Morrison watched the battle develop on his command displays. The humans were winning, but it was costing them. Ships were dying, and each loss represented hundreds of lives. "Sir," reported Commander Walsh, "we're getting a transmission from the Vorthak homeworld. It's their high command." "Put it through." The main screen changed to show a tall Vorthak commander, Its crystal body was cracked and scarred, and its voice sounded tired. "Human Admiral, I am High Commander Vax of the Vorthak Empire. I wish to discuss terms for surrender." Morrison looked at this alien leader who had ordered the deaths of millions of innocent people. "Commander Vax, you will order all Vorthak forces to stand down immediately. You will surrender all Starkiller weapons, and you will submit to judgment by the species you have wronged. And if we refuse?" Morrison gestured toward the viewports where the battle continued to rage. Human ships were systematically destroying Vorthak vessels with cold efficiency. "Then we will continue what you started. We will keep fighting until every single one of your ships is destroyed and your people can never threaten peaceful species again." Vax was quiet for a long moment. "You would destroy our entire civilization?" "Commander, you tried to destroy ours. You used planet-killing weapons against civilian populations. You gave us no choice but to stop you permanently. But we surrender. Surely that changes things." Morrison thought about Captain Cross and the crew of the First Vengeance. He thought about the colonies the Vorthak had destroyed, the millions of dead, the children who would never grow up. It changes some things. "If you surrender now, we won't hunt down every last Vorthak in the galaxy. Your people can live, but your empire dies today." On the surface of Cathera Prime, the human Marines had fought their way to the Central Command Complex. Master Sergeant Collins and his team were preparing to breach the final defensive line when Elder Kairos contacted him through the communication system. "Sergeant Collins, this is Elder Kairos. The Vorthak have agreed to surrender. Please cease your assault." Collins looked around at his Marines. They were tired, dirty, and some of them were wounded. But they were also ready to keep fighting if necessary. "Elder, with respect, I don't trust them. These crystal bastards have lied before. I understand your caution, Sergeant, but Admiral Morrison has accepted their surrender. The war is over." Collins nodded and signaled his troops to lower their weapons. "Marines, stand down. But stay alert. If they try anything, we finish what we started." The formal surrender took place on the bridge of the TDS Honor. High Commander Vax and his staff came aboard under heavy guard. The Vorthak leaders looked strange, surrounded by human Marines like living sculptures guarded by hardened killers. Admiral Morrison read the terms of surrender. The Vorthak Empire would be disbanded. Their military would be reduced to a small defense force. All Starkiller weapons would be destroyed under human supervision. War crimes trials would be held for those responsible for attacking civilian populations. "Do you accept these terms?" Morrison asked. Vax looked at the human admiral, then at the other humans on the bridge. They all looked tired but determined. Even in victory, they seemed ready to keep fighting if necessary. "We accept," he said quietly. Elder Kairos witnessed the signing of the surrender documents. As he watched, he realized that something fundamental had changed in the galaxy. The age of peaceful expansion was over. From now on, aggressive species would know that there were humans watching, ready to respond to any threat against innocent people. After the ceremony, Morrison found himself alone with Elder Kairos in the ship's observation lounge. Through the viewports, they could see Zalani medical ships heading toward the Vorthak homeworld to provide humanitarian aid. "Admiral," Kairos said, "my people are grateful for what you have done. You saved not just us, but every peaceful species in the galaxy." Morrison nodded tiredly. "That was the job, Elder. But at what cost? Your species has lost so much. So many ships, so many lives." Morrison looked out at the stars. "Elder, do you know what humans call this kind of war?" "What?" "A good war. A war fought for the right reasons, against an enemy that needed to be stopped, to protect people who couldn't protect themselves." Kairos thought about this. But surely there could have been another way. Morrison turned to look at the gentle alien. "Elder, your people tried the other way. You tried hiding, running, hoping someone else would solve the problem. How did that work out?" "Not well," Kairos admitted. "Sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to hit them so hard they never want to try bullying again. Sometimes